They didn't invite me to the family reunion. Again. No text, no call. Just smiles on Instagram in a house that was supposed to be part of my future. The same house I begged them to fund for my senior AI research. They said it was too valuable for experiments. Now they're drinking wine in it, pretending I don't exist. But what if I told you? I bought that house last week, and they don't even know it yet. You ever get so tired of being forgotten that you stop asking to be remembered and start making them remember you instead? They say blood is thicker than water, but some blood runs cold. My name is Ivy. I'm 22. I code machines that learn faster than toddlers and can detect bias in hiring algorithms. But I couldn't detect the kind of bias that had been baked into my family long before I was born. I should have seen it years ago in the way they said, "You're so different," like it was both a compliment and a warning. I thought I was carving my own path. I didn't realize I was being exiled for it. The family reunion this year was held at the Hawthorne Estate, a historic mansion passed down 4 generations. And for the second year in a row, I wasn't invited. No RSVP, no family group chat update. Just a parade of polished photos appearing like clockwork on Instagram. Champagne glasses, coordinated outfits, and smiling cousins I barely remembered the names of. In one picture, they posed under the arch I once wanted to turn into a holographic projection lab. I scrolled through the images in silence, chopsticks hovering over a bowl of lukewarm ramen. The irony of artificial intelligence funding my full-ride scholarship, while my actual relatives pretended I didn't exist, wasn't lost on me. I tried not to care. I tried pretending I didn't refresh the page every 10 minutes, like some heartbroken ex. What had I done wrong? Was it because I didn't go into law like the rest of them? Because I didn't straighten my hair or date pre-approved Ivy League legacies? Or maybe it started before I could speak, when my mother chose to marry outside the family tradition, and I inherited the stain of that rebellion. A few days later, while running a late-night data scrape for a project, I came across a flagged notification. An automated real estate crawler I'd built during my sophomore year picked up something odd. The Hawthorne estate was listed for private sale. I blinked twice, reread it, and checked again. The listing was encrypted, intended only for discreet institutional buyers. No public photos, no open house, just a quiet opportunity, cloaked in legalese. It didn't make sense. That house wasn't just real estate. It was a symbol, a power center, a throne for family politics. And now they were selling it. Quietly? Something wasn't right. I logged into a secure digital vault my mother left me before she passed. It was protected by a neural sequence only I could access. Something she'd insisted on when I turned 16. "One day," she said, "you'll need to know the things they won't tell you." Inside was a folder named Inheritance. It held financial records, scanned letters, and something else. An encrypted audio file. I ran a decryption script and listened. "If you're hearing this," my mother's voice echoed, trembling slightly, "then the family finally decided to erase you like they erased me." I stopped breathing. "They sold the house behind your back because they think you won't fight for it. They think you'll disappear. But you don't have to." I pressed pause. For a full minute, I sat motionless, heart pounding in my ears. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't just me being sensitive. They were phasing me out, like I was some failed prototype they'd quietly discard, while the legacy moved on. In the bathroom mirror, I stared at my own reflection, wondering when I'd become so ghost-like in my own lineage. Has anyone else ever been erased by the people who were supposed to love them most? I asked, the words lingering in my mind as if someone, anyone, could answer. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. Instead, I drafted a proposal under a newly formed non-profit entity, the Persephone Foundation, named after a goddess who had once belonged to two worlds. My offer was clean, untraceable, and far above market value. I didn't do it to win. I did it to remind them that I'd never left. I just stopped asking for a seat at their table, and now I was buying the table. I threw myself into the work like it was oxygen. Maybe it was. Distraction is a great anesthetic when grief and betrayal start circling like wolves. Within 3 months, I'd finalized Neurocore, my AI platform that detects manipulation in inheritance documents and estate transfers. The irony didn't escape me. I was building tech to prevent exactly what had been done to me. I kept it quiet. No press releases, no launch parties. Just me, 3 developers I trusted, and a silent fury that translated well into code. I submitted Neurocore for the Artemis Foundation's Rising Innovators Under 25 award and forgot about it, assuming it'd get lost in the usual pile of Ivy League prodigies and biotech darlings. It didn't. I was shortlisted. My inbox filled with congratulations from mentors, VCs, and even tech journalists wanting interviews. But I didn't forward a single email to my family. What would have been the point? They wouldn't have read them. And even if they did, I wasn't sure I wanted them to. That night, I sat on the back steps of my apartment, wrapped in a hoodie too big and too worn. The city lights blinked in the distance, and the hum of life passed me by like I was a paused frame in someone else's movie. If Mom were here, I whispered to the dark, would she be proud? Would she tell me to stop fighting ghosts? Or would she help me haunt them back? I waited for some kind of answer in the wind. Nothing came. Then my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize, with the area code of the old county. Yes, I answered, voice-guarded. This is Stephanie Winters, private real estate broker. Miss, Persephone Foundation's offer has been accepted. The Hawthorne estate is yours, pending final signature. My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't race. I just blinked slowly, as if I'd heard someone say the sky turned green. Understood, I said. Send me the documents. The war hadn't started with a bang, just a quiet click and an unread email in someone else's inbox. A week later, the reunion happened again. They still didn't know. I watched the live stream by accident, or maybe I searched for it on purpose. I don't know anymore. My cousin Jackson, the one who used to lock me in the pantry as a kid, was broadcasting live from the estate's marble foyer. Laughter, crystal flutes, the sound of a string quartet floating from the solarium. I recognized every corner, every detail. I had once drawn schematics to turn that east wing into an immersive neural lab. Now it was serving cocktails and fake smiles, and I owned it. The very next day, I triggered the first clause of the contract. The estate would be transferred to new ownership within 14 business days. Legal notice of eviction was delivered via email and courier. I didn't sign the notice myself. That would have been too easy. The signature line simply read, Executor, the Persephone Foundation. Silence followed. For 2 days. Then the first shot came. A summons. They were suing me. Technically, they were suing the Persephone Foundation, accusing it of fraud, emotional damages, and most absurdly, exploiting private familial knowledge gained unethically. They knew. Somehow they'd figured it out. Or maybe they'd always known, deep down, that the ghost they tried to erase would eventually come back with a pen and a deed. I prepared for war, but before I could hire a legal team, I received an anonymous email. subject line. Pro bono representation available. Your mother once helped me. It's my turn. I was suspicious but curious enough to call. The voice on the other end was weathered, sharp, and familiar in a strange way. His name was Marcus Hale. He used to be a clerk at the courthouse, where my mom worked as a public defender. One night, she'd stayed late and caught a mistake in a filing that would have cost him his job. She fixed it. Quietly. No questions. He never forgot. And now, he'd graduated law school, started his own firm, and had been following my story from the shadows. I said yes, not because I trusted him completely, but because I trusted the way my mother helped people. It always came back. The court, likely salivating over the drama, decided both parties would appear for a mediation session, public, on record, before any formal hearing. The date was set. I would face the people who erased me, and for the first time they would be forced to see me. Healing isn't loud. It's not cinematic. It doesn't come with music swelling in the background. It looks like folding chairs in a dusty community room and 5 people sitting in a circle, avoiding eye contact. But that's where I started. I called it Mental Reboot, a safe space where people estranged from their families could unpack the shame they'd carried like a second skin. I invited friends, old classmates, even strangers from Reddit. Most didn't show, but a few did. And that was enough. We sat with coffee-stained mugs and took turns naming the things we weren't allowed to say at dinner tables. I don't believe in what they believe. I wanted something different. They made me feel like a mistake. When it was my turn, I tried to stay composed. I kept building achievements, hoping they'd build a bridge back to me. But all they did was watch from the shore. I thought I was fine, detached, rational. But my voice cracked midway, and for the first time I let it happen. I cried. Not because they had rejected me, but because I had spent years rejecting myself to fit their design. I'd worn the mask of indifference so well that I forgot I was suffocating under it. That night I sat alone and wrote a letter. Not to them, to me, 10 years ago. Dear Ivy, they will never love you for what you are. They'll only love a version of you that never existed. Don't shrink to fit their mold. Don't break yourself to be digestible. You are not a misprint. You are a prototype. I read it aloud. Once, twice. Then I folded it, slid it into the back of my journal, and hit record on my camera. This is for anyone who's ever been erased, I began, looking into the lens like I was staring down every sneer, every dismissive laugh, every closed door. I'm Ivy Hawthorne. Yes, that Hawthorne. And yes, I bought the estate. My voice didn't shake. This was the house they said was too good for my ideas. The house where I wasn't welcome. The place they turned into a shrine of legacy, without me in it. And now it belongs to me. I paused. Let the silence land. But I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to open the door to those who've been locked out their whole lives. I uploaded the video, shut my laptop, and didn't look at the comments for 3 days. When I finally did, it had over 3 million views. Thousands of messages flooded in. People who had been estranged, discarded, silenced. They didn't just relate, they rallied. The estate was quiet when I stepped onto its porch again. Not as a ghost this time, but as its keeper. We converted the West Wing into learning spaces, brought in trauma counselors, educators, and coders who, like me, had been overlooked. It was no longer a relic of reputation. It became a forge for rebirth. I recorded a follow-up video standing in the same foyer my cousin once live-streamed his cocktails from. This used to be the room where I wasn't allowed to speak, I said. Now it's the room where stories begin. I didn't expect a response from my family, and I certainly didn't expect what came next. One afternoon, buried between emails, I saw a post tagged under my name. It was from Marla, my younger cousin. The one who used to mimic me mockingly, who once locked me out of our shared bedroom because my presence was embarrassing. Her post read, "I used to be cruel. I copied what I saw. I thought Ivy was weird, arrogant, too much. But she was just ahead of her time. I'm sorry. If you'll have me, I want to help." The words hit harder than any insult ever did. Maybe it wasn't about making them pay. Maybe it was about showing them what it meant to grow. The request to visit the center grew rapidly. Volunteers, press, even social workers reached out, and so did media outlets. I declined most, but one reporter I remembered from a tech conference emailed me directly. Her subject line read, "Hawthorne Legacy, from exile to empire." I knew the family had seen it, knew their pride would blister before they let the narrative spiral out of their control. And I was right. Within 48 hours, the family arranged a private emergency meeting. But I wasn't invited. Again, the invitation arrived on monogrammed letterhead, stamped in wax and signed by my Uncle Thomas, always the family's diplomat. A private reconciliation, strictly internal. It read, not a trial, not a confrontation, just clarity. But clarity was never the goal, not with people who'd built their identity on my exclusion. I wore black. Not out of mourning, but because I knew it would unsettle them. I arrived at the estate's drawing room. Yes, my drawing room now, where 3 generations of Hawthorns waited in stiff chairs and judgmental silence. My father didn't meet my eyes. My uncle offered a handshake. My aunt sighed like she'd just stepped into a scandal, not a living room. "We're not here to rehash the past," Uncle Thomas began. "But you've made some choices, Ivy, public ones. And frankly, you've shamed the family name." Aunt Sylvia cut in. "What you did with the house, the press, the videos, it's theatrical, cheap. Our lineage is not a spectacle." I stood quietly, hands folded. "You were always difficult," she added, voice rising. "But this is betrayal. You've weaponized your pain." "I haven't weaponized anything," I said calmly. "I've spoken." "You've mocked tradition," my father finally snapped. This center you built. It erases everything we stood for." "No," I said. "It exposes it." The room went still. I walked to the side wall where I'd installed a small projection screen earlier that morning. Without another word, I clicked the remote. A video flickered to life. My mother's voice filled the room. "If you're seeing this, Ivy," she said, sitting in her old office, "then they've finally noticed you. Not because they love you, because they can't ignore you anymore. I know what they'll say. That you're breaking us. That you're ungrateful. That you're the problem." My hands trembled just slightly on the remote. "But you're not breaking tradition," she said. "You're healing the damage it did. You're the scar that proves the wound closed." When the video ended, I said nothing. Neither did anyone else. 10 full minutes passed in suffocating silence. Then my grandfather, once the voice of absolute finality in this family, stood up without a word and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. No one followed. The meeting dissolved after that. Some murmured apologies. Some didn't speak at all. But I could feel the fracture, sharp and irreversible. Days later, the headlines started. "Family heiress turns legacy into activism hub. Tech prodigy or vindictive granddaughter?" The whispers escalated. One network asked if I had a vendetta. Another requested a live debate with a family member. My inbox filled with both praise and poison. I ignored most of it, but one interviewer managed to get through. A woman named Lee, soft-spoken but piercing in her questions. "Is this about revenge, Ivy?" I stared into the lens. Thought of my mother. Thought of every quiet meal I ate alone while the rest of them toasted in mansions. "I'm not interested in revenge," I said. "I'm interested in justice. And justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like peace, and silence, and finally being free to breathe." I closed my laptop and went back to the one place that still felt like mine, my childhood room, untouched since the last time I was welcome here. I brushed away dust from the walls, finding the faint scrawl of my mother's handwriting beneath the peeling paint. "You can lose everything, baby girl. Just don't lose yourself." That night, I slept on the floor. No mattress, just a blanket, a window, and a sense of something closing, or maybe beginning. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing. Someone had dug up an old article, archived, buried, almost erased, but not quite. The headline made my blood freeze. "Judge Hawthorne accused of pressuring daughter to terminate pregnancy. In 2000, the daughter was my mother. The child she refused to terminate was me." The letter came folded in 4, trembling ink on yellowed paper. No envelope, just my name written in blocky, uneven print. I found it tucked into the gate ledger at the front of the estate, as if the courier didn't dare enter the house. Or maybe someone else had delivered it, someone who needed the message to be found but not announced. "I was wrong," it began, his words, his handwriting. "But I don't have much time left to say it out loud. Maybe that's cowardice. Maybe it's age. But I owe you this, even if it's late, especially because it's late." I stared at the page for what felt like hours. There were no grand confessions, no detailed apologies, just a string of sentences that were jagged, unfinished, and deeply human. "I didn't know how to handle a girl like your mother. She reminded me too much of myself before I buried all the soft parts. I thought pushing her away would make her stronger. Instead, I made her disappear. And then, I did the same to you. I see that now. The signature was faint, just the initials, but it was enough. I found out he'd been hospitalized that week. Age, mostly. Complications stacked on top of each other like bricks. I didn't bring flowers when I visited. I brought a photo of my mother, one where she was smiling so wide it looked like freedom. He didn't apologize again. We didn't revisit the wounds. We talked about my mom's laugh, about the way she danced when she cooked, about the time she tried to teach me how to drive, and I almost took out the neighbor's mailbox. He listened, nodded, and for the first time didn't try to interrupt the version of her I chose to remember. As I left the room, he said, "You built something good, Ivy." That was it. But it was enough. Outside, the air hit different, like something old had cracked and let in sunlight for the first time. I walked back to the estate and sat under the same tree where, as a child, I'd buried a time capsule with a letter saying I wanted to become someone they'd never forget. At the time, I meant famous. Now I just meant seen. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "There are apologies we'll never get, but that doesn't mean we can't forgive. Not for them. For us." The next week, I sent out hand-inked invitations to the family. No passive-aggressive texts, no veiled threats, just a simple message. You're invited to the reopening of Hawthorne House, not as heirs, not as enemies, but as people. No titles, no politics, just stories. Some didn't respond. Some did. And they came. The first thing I did when they walked in was gather them in the grand hall, once a monument to legacy, and show them the new sign, the Persephone Center for Belonging and Repair. I stood on the staircase and said, "This house has held too many secrets, too much silence. From now on, the only rule is this: no one gets erased because they're different." They didn't clap, but they didn't leave either. We started a series called The Recall Sessions. Small groups, no pressure, just space to share memories, regrets, laughter, and silence. Some couldn't speak. Some couldn't stop crying. All of it mattered. A week later, someone unexpected arrived. My great-uncle Alan. I barely remembered him. Just whispers at family dinners, a name no one liked to mention. He'd been excommunicated for being gay. I was told he moved to Seattle, or died, or both. But there he was, on the porch with a cane and a nervous smile. "I saw your video," he said, "and I had to see it for myself. I never thought I'd step foot here again. But you've done what none of us could. You turned this place into a home." He looked around at the walls and whispered, "Your mum would have been proud." I wanted to say something profound, but all I could do was hug him, long and quiet. Change wasn't a slogan anymore. It was a presence. More people came. Not just family, neighbors, educators, kids who'd been kicked out of their homes, mothers looking for somewhere safe to cry. We opened free tutoring programs, tech literacy courses, and community dinners where no one asked, "What do you do?" but instead, "How are you healing?" Then came the invitation. It arrived via email this time from a name I didn't recognize. The United Nations Human Rights Council was hosting a summit on identity and familial exclusion, and someone had submitted my story. They wanted me to speak, not just about what I'd built, but about what it cost to build it. I sat with the email open for hours. This was bigger than me now, bigger than a house, bigger than revenge. It was about every child who'd been left out of family photos, every teenager forced to uncome out, every adult who never got invited back. I accepted. My topic, the architecture of belonging. I closed my laptop and stepped out into the courtyard. The garden bloomed brighter that day. Not because it was a new season, but because we'd finally stopped pretending the past didn't happen and started planting something better over it. The house was quiet in the morning, not silent, just resting. It had learned, like the rest of us, how to breathe again. I stood on the front steps in a loose cotton dress, no shoes, hair windblown, arms folded. One by one they came. No one wore suits, no heels, no pearls. Just people, shedding armor they didn't even know they'd worn for decades. Some looked nervous, some embarrassed, but all of them walked through the doors they once believed belonged only to their version of the family. Today they came differently, not to claim space, but to share it. Then came the wheelchair. My grandfather was smaller than I remembered. His eyes had lost their fire, but held something quieter. Not regret, not sorrow. Something raw, something closer to truth. He stopped in front of me, raised his eyes and said, "I never learned how to love right. I thought it meant control, correction. But you," his voice cracked, "you've taught this family how to love again." I didn't say anything. He didn't expect me to. The moment was enough. Inside, people spread across rooms that once separated them. They gathered in corners over tea, over memories. Some laughed, some cried. The portraits on the wall hadn't changed, but somehow, the air had. During the open floor sharing, a little girl with spring curls and a pink dress tugged at my hand. "Miss Ivy?" she asked, voice high and hopeful. "I want to learn AI, like you, so I can help people too." I crouched down, looked her in the eye, and smiled. then you already have everything you need. The next few months moved in waves. I finished the manuscript I'd been quietly working on since my mother died. A mix of memoir, research, and reflection. It traced my journey from a girl erased in her own home to the woman who turned silence into sanctuary. I titled it, From Ghosted to Groundbreaking. The launch was quiet. No confetti. No bestseller stickers. Just a small reading at the Persephone Center, where I opened with, "This is not a story of vengeance. This is a blueprint for belonging." The world responded, not loudly, but steadily. Emails, letters, even hand-drawn notes from teenagers who saw themselves in my pages. It wasn't about my name anymore. It was about what the name could mean if we let it. We made Open Heart Day an annual tradition. Every spring we opened the estate gates wide and invited anyone. Estranged children, rejected elders, people who carried the ache of not being enough for those who raised them. There were no speeches, just stories, and hugs, and food passed between strangers who remembered, for one day at least, what connection tasted like. One afternoon, while filming a short for our center's website, I looked into the camera and spoke without a script. If you've ever felt like you had to perform for love, or shrink for approval, or disappear so someone else could shine, please hear this. You are not a malfunction. You are not too much. You're the reason. The system needs to change. I paused. And if no one's ever told you this, you belong. Here. Now. As you are. We didn't post it immediately. I watched it back 3 times, wondering if it was too soft, too raw. It wasn't. It was real. Weeks later, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. The sender was from the admissions office of Hawthorne College, the same institution my grandfather had once attended, and been quietly expelled from after a scandal the family never discussed. The subject line, Invitation for Distinguished Lectureship. I thought it was a mistake, but the message was clear. They wanted me, not as a legacy, not as a placeholder, but as someone who'd redefined what legacy could be. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied with 2 words. I accept. Not for revenge, not for approval, but because healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means standing in front of it, taller, wiser, and finally, unafraid. And when I walked back out to the courtyard, past the rooms that once held whispers, I felt it fully. This wasn't just my house anymore. It was everyone's, and it was finally home.